Hi, everybody. It's CC and JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour, but today we are the Nevada Author Network. By the way, that's CC. I'm JT. Hi. The Nevada Author Network is a partnership between our company, Two More Books LLC, with the Sierra Arts Foundation, out of Reno, Nevada, and the Sierra Arts Literary Community. Members of the Sierra Arts Literary Community appear on this podcast because we want to elevate the fantastic work that they're doing in both the literature and in this particular instance, Hollywood. So this is going to be kind of a fascinating interview for you folks, especially for us writers who dream of Tinseltown. So without any further hesitation, let us welcome Mr. Gavin Black and Willow.
Willow!
Oh, hi, Gavin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. A little bit about me. I guess my start in writing started when I was a little kid. I was born premature, so I spent the majority of my childhood in the hospital. And unfortunately, at that time, we didn't have Game Boys or tablets or anything like that, or even decent television. You had 2, 4, and 8 in the hospital. And during the daytime, that was all soap operas. And as a kid, that was really boring. Luckily, my dad rescued me by bringing me The Hobbit. And I jumped into reading that. And then that led me into David Eddings and science fiction, trying to figure out, the rules of robotics, and reaching out and had some amazing doctors and nurses who kept bringing me books. And so as that went along, I was more fascinated by science fiction and writing when I was in high school. I was blessed to have a teacher who taught a science fiction fantasy class, who also had a after school book club that when I graduated I attended and still attend to this day. And during this time I always wrote, but I wrote for myself. I never felt comfortable writing my own story for everyone else. I was lucky enough in 2010 to go to Worldcon here in Reno, Nevada, where I met my wonderful wife. And then later on, when we were in San Jose, I was talking to some authors there, because normally with Worldcons, I'm always looking for a new book, a new author to follow. And I don't recall which author I was talking to, but I was talking to one and I said, I can't find anything that really draws me in. And they said, well, if you can't find it, then you need to write it yourself. And so I got home, my wife goes, well, what are you going to do? I had a magic system that I built for a board game system. So I took that and actually crafted my first novel around it called Crop Burner. And initially I thought that would just be a, one-off and done. But it came out and it had some great editorial reviews, and then next thing you know, people are like, well, what are you going to write next? What are you going to write next? And then on the following 4th of July, I was up in Idaho with my kids, and they were fighting in the back seat of the car, and I made a comment to one of them, well, I bet you could just wish you could probably exchange your brother for a new brother, right? And that kind of was the impetus for me to write The Friend Exchange, which is a Twilight Zone episode of sorts. And then as that got published and started coming out, about a couple months after that was published, right as it got published, it hit #1 to Amazon. And then shortly after that, I was here in Reno having lunch with a friend. And as we were discussing writing and stuff, a lady next to the table next to us said, hey, excuse me, I know you guys are talking. Do you mind me asking what you guys are talking about? And I said, well, I introduced myself, and her name is Randy, and she happened to be a person who is an agent, but also facilitates putting writers and other agents together. And so we talked for a little bit. I happen to have a couple of copies of my book in my car. So I handed those to her and kind of left, not sharing well it's what happened. About a week later, she called me up and said, I read The Friend Exchange. It's one of the best books I've read. I've sent it to a couple of people in Hollywood. I hope you don't mind. And I contacted the agent and told him if he didn't sign you, he'd be an idiot. So then within a week after that, I was in contact with my now current agent. His name's Eric, and the people in Hollywood started going down that process. So it was really like a whirlwind thing all at once. So it's pretty amazing.
This is so fascinating to me on so many levels, and I'm sure to CC too. This is excellent for you. Just a wonderful adventure. And not to make this about me, but in a way, we are brothers from another mother. I also was a sickly child and turned to science fiction. And being older than you, I remember Star Trek, the original series, when it was first broadcast in living color on NBC. But the masters that you cite and the masters that I cite are very, very similar. And in fact, in your work, you have a little Easter egg there, which just tickled me when I saw that it's set in the town of Bradbury. Good for you. Good for you. Can you tell us how the science fiction trope, the science fiction, shaped your thinking when it came to writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think good science fiction is science fiction that when you come away from it makes you think, right? That's always the best science fiction. It would like make you reevaluate either something in your life, reevaluate a opinion or belief you had before. So with the Friend Exchange, I wanted it to write it in a way to get kids to kind of reevaluate how they approach friendship and what friendship really meant. Because I know when I was a kid, and seeing my kids grow up, friendship can be very flippant between kids, right? It's very like you're my youngest. When we used to take him to the park to play in the playground, he would come back going, "Oh, I've got three new best friends, and they're three kids he just met," and then the next day he would totally forget about them, right? So I kind of wanted kids to kind of think about what friendship really meant and like what that bond of friendship is, and if something happens with it, it's not something you don't just throw away. It's something that you need to kind of cherish and kind of see if you can work those problems out.
It's very true. And since you mentioned that you got the idea a little bit from your kids having that discussion in the back seat, are your kids fans of science fiction and have they read your book?
Yes, they are, and they have read my book, and they enjoy it very much. As a matter of fact, my youngest has been playing around with writing. He's still kind of young, where he hasn't been able to kind of quite stick with a story long enough to get it all the way through from beginning to end. My writing bug has kind of fallen onto them a little bit. So yeah, but they both have. We really we always read to them when they were younger, and we've really ingrained in the idea that you kind of can, always escape into a book. And also, there's nothing in life you can't do without a good book in your hand, right? To kind of teach you, train you in how, whatever that is that you can do.
So let's talk a little bit about the Friend Exchange, a little bit more about the Friend Exchange. And I read, both of us, excuse me, we read the presentation, which is just endlessly fascinating. And oh gosh, we're so envious. But it's awesome for you. But I like how you use simple, how should I say, the simple tools to project complex ideas. For example, the playing cards, which I think every culture has playing cards in it, using playing cards to represent friends. Where do those kind of ideas come from?
I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just a way I want to, when I'm writing, I kind of want a way that's visually easy for somebody to think about something, right? So like everyone's usually has used playing cards, so to kind of use them as the ideas of playing cards is really quick and easy to kind of get somebody to visualize kind of what's happening and stuff like that. So, and also oddly, and my wife is kind of weirded out by the idea, but I have very visual dreams, and when I'm writing, I'll dream a lot of like what the story is about. Because dreams are the way they are, sometimes they're not quite what you want at the end, but they usually will help give me a lot of ideas the next day of like, oh, hey, that was a really good idea. Let's jump on this and kind of go that direction, see where it goes.
So your writing process then, do you, I guess it sounds like us, you kind of are constantly thinking about what you're writing. There's really no break from your imagination, I guess. Do you have a set writing schedule and are you a morning I get up out of bed right after you have these dreams, start putting it down, or do you have another schedule?
Usually, so if I have like a really visual dream, I will have a book, I'll either jot down, have a notebook, I'll write it in, or I will write it down on my computer. I work from home, so what I usually will do is I will take breaks through work throughout the day and write for that. And then at the end of my workday, usually I will have an hour or so before the family comes home. I'll write for that, and then when after everyone goes to bed, I'll usually write for another hour, a couple hours after at that time. So.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. So let's talk about, I don't know, the elephant in the room. You've mentioned it, but let's talk about the elephant in the room in Hollywood. Let's talk about Hollywood. I assume that almost the first word out of your mouth after I ask you this question is realistic. But what advice would you give poor independent writers like ourselves who want to expand their literary works into the Hollywood environment?
The first thing I would almost say is which is something I didn't know until this happened to me, is learn how to write like a script. When this came on and the producer signed me on to do this, the very first thing she said was, you know, I want a pilot episode. And I had never written a script before. I had no idea how a script should be done. And it's a very different medium than you are as writing. Because as a writing, you can describe things and be very descriptive, whereas on a pilot episode and everything you write for a TV show or a movie, it's all ruled dialogue, and with kind of settings. So you kind of have to approach it with a different mindset. And I would almost say, take your work that you want to do with that and look at how that setting will change, where how the dialogue will change, where there are extra characters going to be. In the case of the Friend Exchange, it's honestly too short of a book to make into a series. So I had to go in and actually build that world out even further than it was, add in new characters, add in a bigger setting, add in a little bit more plot design into it than the original book was. So there was a lot of things that had to go into that I never really kind of thought about, that I kind of wish I had initially, because I kind of was a little bit rushed into trying to kind of get all that, fleshed out for them.
Yeah, scripts are a very different beast from prose writing, I guess, because I did try that back in the 80s. I actually submitted a couple scripts to Star Trek The Next Generation. So I
Nice.
went through, and one of the recommendations that I heard at the time was to watch your favorite television shows and kind of learn about the different story beats and how they would set things up, because you have that very specific framework. Is that something that you did, or did you have a class or something? How did you learn to do the screenwriting?
So my producer sent me a bunch of books to read, and so I sat down and read a bunch of, and they kind of went over like plot design, kind of like you had one of them kind of talked about your look at it for as a season, right? And then figure out like how many episodes do you think you're going to be, where do you think each episode's going to want to end, so that way you can actually get where you want. And then for the Friend Exchange, they only wanted 15 to 20 minutes worth of actual time. And so I learned that every page of that you write on a script is usually roughly 1 minute. So you got to keep it. So when I originally sent it to her, I think it was 30 pages, and she's like, "No, you remember I wanted 20 minutes." I'm like, "All right." So I had to get it down to exactly, I think it was between 18 and 20 pages. So, and then. So yeah, and that was kind of where I learned to kind of approach it, I guess.
Okay, that's incredibly fascinating because I've never done it. I can imagine a screenwriting being, just a different world. But let's shift back to prose for a second. What is the future for Gavin Black? I mean, right now your entire universe is getting ready for for your pilot and everything like that. But are you going to be shifting back to prose and doing any of that kind of writing? Are you in a sort of it depends mode?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm already back into prose. I figured that that's kind of where at least my bread and butter is right now. And then if the Hollywood thing takes off, I'll, reevaluate there. I have my latest books with my agent. It's called Journey Through the Forgotten. And it's written as a fake memoir, as an urban fantasy. I take a lot of my real life experiences with my two grandfathers, and put it into the book. One of my grandfathers, he was very eccentric. As a young boy, he taught me how to go out and set off dynamite, train hop cars, play poker, all the things that a mother would never ever want her son to do with their grandfather. And at the end of every encounter with him, he'd always tell me, do not tell your mom what we did." And I never did. And not until he passed away, and then all of us grandkids sat around and told grandpa stories, and all of our mothers basically hit the floor wondering what you did what with him. He got older, he got dementia and Alzheimer's, and then we put him in a facility where he broke out with a World War II vet. The vet got captured about the next day. He broke into his house, and he had stashed a driver's license, a credit card where no one knew about it, and just disappeared. We didn't know where he was at for about 3 weeks. And then we got a call from the Colorado Highway Patrol and said that he had hit a cow with a rental car. The farmer had brought him in, was taking care of him, and one of us to come and pick him up. So the story kind of picks up right about there, where my character in the book goes to pick him up from there to kind of bring him back to Reno. And then I grabbed my other grandfather. He was Irish, so I took all of the Irish mythology, the idea of the Fae, and I wrapped that into my grandfather character. And as we come back on a road trip from Colorado, we kind of slip in and out of the Fae, and I kind of learned that my grandfather's not really who he is and who I thought he was. And I used the idea of the Fae, where you lose your memories coming in and out, to kind of get an idea from my character in the story to understand how Alzheimer's is from the perspective of someone with Alzheimer's, while also trying to work with somebody with Alzheimer's and the struggles that kind of is as well. So
Yeah, we certainly
Wow.
can emphasize. Our family is also affected, so yeah, it's a struggle. So we respect your strength, but also your creativity, because this is an important message that I think that folks that haven't been touched by this should hear about and should hear more about. Is that sort of your mission in a way? Do you want to say?
yeah, I guess it was is that I think to show people that it's not something that just affects somebody, one family. It affects everyone that is touched by that person, including the person who has it. I mean, I try in that story to kind of give his perspective and his point of view and what it might feel like having those memories. Being able to have clear days where you realize that you don't remember things have happened because of what's going on, and then also the struggle of wondering who you forgot. That was one of the things that my grandfather really struggled with, is that he realized he'd forgotten people, but he just didn't know who they were. And that whole idea of having that on the back of your mind, always wondering, like, who is really important in your life that you might have forgotten, or who do you still remember that you're slowly forgetting and you don't remember the important parts.
Wow, that's really heavy, but it's an important thing for people to understand because, as JT said, we're going through that with a family member too, and it is very frustrating for them as well as everybody who's trying to support them. So, it sounds like an amazing book. We both are also of Irish ancestry, so that really resonates with us in a lot of different ways. Sounds like your grandfather was quite the character.
He was a lot of fun as a kid growing up to be around. As an adult now, having kids, I would be really worried if my dad had done that with my boys. But at the same time, I learned so much from him on the things that things not to do, I guess, as a kid. It was interesting because there's a lot, setting up dynamite and stuff. You would think, that it sounds dangerous, but I always felt around my grandfather that I felt comfortable. One of the stories that happened is that there was a big rock in a wall that we're trying to dislodge. And as we set off the dynamite, it actually shot up and over us. And I think it was the
Oh,
very first time I actually thought, this is actually dangerous
mm-hmm.
as a kid. But before that, you're like, oh, it's my grandfather. There's nothing wrong that can happen with him, right? Or, sitting on the top of a train car, as it goes along down the tracks, you're like, it's dangerous. But as a kid, I was kind of like, I'm fine. I'm with him. So, nothing bad could happen, right?
Wow,
Oh, that's a
that's just
wow.
amazing.
And of course, what you've just done is you've added to our to be read file because
Yeah.
we have since we've been doing these interviews, the people that we've spoken to, the writers that we've spoken to, our to be read file stack has been just climbing, and I think we've got one more entry in there. So Gavin, so last thing, we're going to throw it over to you. Tell us about what you got out there. Tell us where we can find you. Where
Okay.
can we find your books, and where can we find you on social media? And by the way,
Okay.
hi Willow.
And yeah, so you can go to gavinblackwrites.com. That's my website. It has a link to my two current books out. The first one, Crop Burner, The Tale of Fionn and the Demon. And then The Front Exchange. It has a link to buy it directly from me on my website, which I get a little bit more money if you do it that way. You can also have links to Amazon, Barnes Noble to get them as well as the audiobook for The Crop Burner that was put out. You'll also find me on Facebook at Gavin Black Writes. I'm not on Twitter anymore, but that's about it. And then if you guys are going to be at Rose City Comic Con in September, I will be there selling books as well.
Excellent, excellent. We
That's
look,
great.
That's great. Anyway, so we thank Gavin Black for joining us here on the Nevada Author Network, and Willow, of course, so I guess has disappeared now, but anyway. Willow, there you are. Willow, you're a good dog. You're a good girl. And so we thank Gavin and Willow for being here on the Nevada Author Network. The Nevada Author Network is a collaboration between the Sierra Arts Foundation, the Sierra Arts Literary Community, and Two More Books, LLC, to elevate the visibility of writers and creators like Gavin and Willow across the internet. All of them, everybody that's appeared on our podcast has been doing fantastic work, and we please ask that you go to their websites, you click on their links, and you take a chance. You will not be disappointed. Thank you again, Gavin.
And thanks so much for bringing me on here. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care, everybody. Thank you much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.